Reign over Seoul. A boardroom of glass and steel. Every woman in the city wanted 5 minutes with Seo Junwoo, a look, a name, a chance. She wanted the door. When Felicia turned her back on him without a second glance, something in his chest cracked open for the first time in 32 years. He did not know her name yet. He only knew he would burn the city down to hear it. Welcome to Afro-Korea TV. Please like, share, and subscribe. Seo Junwoo did not chase. He was the youngest chairman in the history of Jun Group, a man whose signature moved stock markets and whose silence ended careers. Boardrooms went quiet when he entered them. Grown men twice his age straightened their ties in his presence. He had inherited an empire built on steel and shipping, and in 6 years he had tripled it, crushing 3 hostile takeovers and 1 attempt by his own uncle to unseat him. Women arranged themselves like art around him at galas, at press dinners, at charity balls, hoping to be noticed, hoping their name might be the one attached to his in the morning papers. He noticed no one. He had built a wall so tall around his heart that even his own mother called him ice, and she had built the wall herself, brick by brick, from the day his father died and left a 9-year-old boy in charge of grieving alone. That evening, at the Jun Group Foundation Gala, the wall cracked. The ballroom of the Grand Hyatt glittered with 1,000 candles and twice as many rehearsed smiles. Junwoo moved through it the way he moved through everything, efficiently, coldly, already calculating when he could leave. His assistant, Han Bile, trailed 2 steps behind with a tablet full of names he was supposed to remember and didn't care to. Then he saw her. Felicia stood near the translation booth at the edge of the room, wrapped in a simple emerald dress that did nothing to hide the confidence in her spine. She was curvy, warm-eyed, unimpressed by chandeliers or titles, laughing at something one of the foreign delegates said with her whole face, not the polished half-smile every other woman in the room seemed to have practiced in a mirror. He found himself walking toward her before he'd decided to. "You're the interpreter," he said when he reached her. It wasn't a question. He already knew. She looked him over once, jaw, watch, the careful arrogance in his posture, and said, "You're staring." Then she turned and walked back toward the delegation, leaving him standing there with a half-empty glass of champagne and a feeling he could not name.
No bow.
No blush. No lingering glance over her shoulder to see if he was still watching. He stood there long after she'd gone, feeling the ground shift beneath a man who never lost his footing. "Who was that?" he asked Han Bile. Not quite a question. Felicia Adeyemi. Freelance interpreter, contracted through the foreign ministry for the delegation.
29.
Fluent in 4 languages. Han Bile hesitated. "Sir, you've never asked me about a woman before." "Find out where she'll be tomorrow," Junwoo said, already walking away. "For what reason, sir?" He didn't answer. He didn't have one yet. The next day, he had his assistant find her schedule the way he'd find a competitor's quarterly earnings, thoroughly, without apology. Felicia had no interest in being found. That should have ended it right there. Instead, Junwoo found himself rerouting his entire week around the small, foolish possibility of seeing her again. Later that night, he showed up at the cafe near the ministry building where she worked between contracts, ordering coffee he had no intention of drinking, sitting in the corner with his tablet open and unread. He watched her laugh with a coworker in a way she had never once looked at him, and something ugly and unfamiliar coiled low in his chest when a man at the counter leaned in too close, said something that made her tilt her head back and laugh again. Jealousy. He recognized the shape of it even though he'd never worn it before. He said nothing to her that night. He simply left before she noticed him, and on his way out, quietly told the cafe's owner to give her the following day off, paid in full, and to tell no one who had arranged it. A few days later, Felicia found out anyway. She stormed into Jun Group's headquarters in the middle of the afternoon, past a stunned front desk, past his assistant's half-hearted attempt to stop her, straight through the glass doors of his top-floor office. "You don't get to control my schedule," she snapped, arms crossed over a folder she'd clearly needed that extra shift's pay to afford. Junwoo, who had just ended a call with a shipping partner in Singapore, looked up at her with something dangerously close to relief. "I wanted to see you again," he said simply. No apology. No performance. Just the truth. laid bare like a man and used to wanting anything he couldn't simply acquire. That's not how people work, she said, quieter now, thrown by his honesty. You don't just buy your way into someone's life. Then tell me how, he said, standing, rounding the desk until there were only a few feet between them. I've never asked anyone before.
I don't know how.
For the first time since the gala, she didn't walk away. You start, she said slowly, by asking. Like a normal person. Not by rearranging a stranger's entire week. Have coffee with me, he said. Ask normally, as you say. She studied him for a long moment. The youngest chairman in Korea, standing in a $3,000 suit, looking at her like she was the only unsolved problem in his life.
One coffee, she said.
And if you try anything like this again, I will make sure every reporter in this city knows Seo Junwoo stalks interpreters for fun. Understood, he said, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he smiled. Not the practiced press smile, but something smaller and real. Their first coffee lasted 3 hours. He didn't check his phone once, a fact that later horrified Han Bile when she reviewed his calendar and found 4 missed calls from the Singapore office he simply hadn't noticed. Felicia talked about her grandmother's village outside Lagos, about learning Korean from dramas her mother hated, about the strange loneliness of being fluent in everyone else's language and still feeling unheard in her own life. Junwoo talked about none of the things he was supposed to talk about: stock prices, expansion plans, the family legacy, and instead found himself telling her, almost against his will, about the year his father died and how he'd learned to stop crying in front of people because it made the board nervous. That's a sad way to grow up, she said softly. I didn't think so, until just now, he admitted. By the end of the week, Junwoo found reasons: translation contracts, cultural liaisons, business dinners where her fluency in 4 languages became suddenly, urgently necessary. Felicia knew what he was doing. She let him do it anyway, telling herself it was only business, telling herself the flutter in her chest each time she saw his name on a contract was simple professional pride. But at every dinner, she caught him watching her mouth when she spoke, memorizing the way she tucked her hair back when she was thinking hard about a translation. And every time another executive leaned too close, complimented her too warmly, Junwoo's jaw would tighten, his voice would drop half an octave, cold enough to end the conversation without a single raised word. You get jealous easily, she teased one night, after a dinner where he'd all but glared a junior partner into silence for asking for her number. I don't get jealous, he said, walking her to her car with his hand hovering, not quite touching, at the small of her back. I get possessive. There's a difference. Is there? Jealousy is fear of losing something you don't have yet. What I feel is the certainty that you're mine to protect. She should have laughed it off. Instead, her breath caught, and for one dangerous second, she let herself imagine what it would feel like to be wanted like that, completely unapologetically, without hesitation. That's a very confident thing to say to someone you've known for 2 weeks, she managed. I've spent 32 years being confident about the wrong things, he said. This is the first thing I've ever been certain of. The following morning, his mother summoned him to the family estate. Chairwoman Seo Mirand did not approve of translators, of women without family names attached to conglomerates, of anything that could not be controlled, predicted, or written into a prenuptial agreement. I hear you've been seen with a foreign interpreter, she said, not looking up from her tea. End it. Before the board notices. Before the tabloids do. Junwoo, who had never once defied his mother in business, said only, no. Mirand's teacup paused halfway to her lips. Excuse me? I said no, mother. I'm not ending it. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it she hadn't heard since his father's funeral, a boy refusing, for the first time, to be managed. I have given this family every year of my adult life. I am not giving them this. It was the first time in his adult life he had chosen a person over the empire that raised him, and he walked out of that estate feeling, strangely, lighter than he had in years. That evening, he found Felicia on the rooftop of her apartment building, staring at the skyline, arms wrapped around herself against the wind. He climbed the 6 flights because the elevator was broken, and he didn't complain once. How did you know I was up here? She asked, not turning around. I didn't. I just kept climbing until I found you. He draped his jacket over her shoulders without asking. Your mother doesn't approve of me, does she? She doesn't know about you, Felicia said. But if she did, no. Men like you don't stay, Junwoo. Men like you collect and move on. My mother doesn't approve of anything that isn't a merger, he said, ignoring the sting of her words for a moment to answer the part he could fix. I stopped needing her approval this afternoon. Felicia finally turned to face him, startled. What does that mean? It means I told her no. For the first time in my life, I told Seo, Mira no, and it was because of you. He stepped closer, close enough that the wind carried the scent of her perfume between them. I've spent my whole life being chased, Felicia. Every woman who's ever looked at me saw the company, the name, the money. You looked at me and saw a man staring too long, and you left. Do you understand what that did to me? I have never wanted anything the way I want you to stay. I'm scared, she admitted, voice breaking slightly, the wind pulling loose strands of hair across her face. Men like you don't stay. You collect. You get bored. You move on to the next impossible thing, and I refuse to be someone's impossible thing that gets solved and discarded. Then let me prove you wrong, he murmured, closing the distance between them, his forehead resting against hers, breath mingling in the cold air. Let me be the one thing in your life that doesn't leave. I am not asking you to trust the company, or the name, or the money. I am asking you to trust me. She didn't answer with words. She answered by not stepping back, by letting her hands find the front of his shirt, by closing the last few inches between them until there was no space left for doubt. That night became a memory neither of them spoke of directly afterward, a night of trembling hands and quiet confessions, of walls coming down in the dark, of two guarded people choosing, for a few stolen hours, to be completely unguarded together. There was nothing hurried about it. Every touch felt like a question being answered, every breath a promise neither of them had the courage to say aloud yet. When morning came, sunlight slipping gold across the sheets, Felicia woke first and panicked. Men like him didn't stay. She'd said it herself, out loud, the night before. What if last night had only proven her mother right, proven every warning true, that she was a woman who'd let herself be swept up in a fantasy that would evaporate the moment the sun came up? She dressed quickly, quietly, gathering her things with shaking hands, and left before he woke, leaving no note. Only an empty space where she'd been, and the faint impression of her head still pressed into the pillow. Junwoo woke to silence and knew, before he even reached for her side of the bed, that she was gone. The sheets were cool. Her shoes, which had been by the door the night before, were gone too. He called. No answer. He called again. Still nothing. He went to her apartment, taking the stairs two at a time, and found it empty, her landlord unhelpful, muttering something about tenants coming and going as they pleased. He went to the cafe. Her coworker shrugged, wiping down the counter without meeting his eyes. She said she needed space. She said not to tell you where she went if you came looking. For a man who had never chased anyone in his life, Junwoo spent the next 3 days doing nothing else. Canceling meetings his board had never seen him cancel, ignoring calls from Singapore, driving through the city late at night past every place he could remember her mentioning, until Hanbile finally, carefully, suggested he might be losing his mind. He said simply. I don't care. He found her, finally, at a small chapel on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place she'd once mentioned her grandmother used to take her when she visited Korea as a child. She was sitting alone on a bench outside, hands folded, eyes red-rimmed from crying she wouldn't admit to. You could have just told me to stop looking, he said quietly, sitting beside her, careful not to crowd her, leaving a full arm's length of space between them even though every instinct told him to close it. I thought if I left first it wouldn't hurt as much, she whispered. I thought you'd realize I was never the kind of woman men like you keep. I thought you'd wake up, see what I am, ordinary, foreign, nobody your mother would ever approve of, and I wanted to leave before you could. Felicia. He turned to face her fully, his voice cracking with something raw and unfamiliar, fear, real and undisguised. I have spent my entire life being wanted for what I have. You are the only person who has ever made me feel like I was the thing worth wanting, not my name, not my company, not my father's legacy. Do you understand how terrifying that is for a man who's never let anyone close enough to leave a mark? I didn't run from that terror. I chased it. I chased you through 3 days and a city of 11 million people, and I am not going to stop just because you got scared first. She searched his face for the lie, the exit strategy, the boredom she'd been taught to expect from powerful men who always, eventually, found something newer to want. She found none of it. Only a man who looked, for the first time since she'd met him, genuinely afraid of losing something. I'm still scared, she admitted. Then be scared with me, he said, finally closing the distance, taking her cold hands in his. Just don't do it alone. I would rather stand in this terror with you than win anything alone ever again. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding, and for the first time, she leaned into him instead of away. By the following week, they had settled into something neither of them had a name for yet, not quite public, not quite hidden, careful and new. He picked her up from contracts in a car without his company's logo. She started keeping a spare toothbrush at his penthouse without either of them discussing it. Small things. Domestic things. Things that terrified them both a little in the best way. But the danger neither of them had seen coming arrived that Thursday in the form of a scandal manufactured by a rival conglomerate, the Han family, longtime enemies of Jun Group ever since a hostile takeover attempt 5 years prior, eager to see Junwoo's relationship with a nobody destroy his standing before the board ahead of a critical merger vote. Photos of Felicia, doctored and twisted, appeared in the tabloids by morning, suggesting she was a gold digger, a foreign opportunist angling for a green card and a fortune, a liability to the June name that the board would never approve. Anonymous sources, later traced back to Han Suk-min's PR firm, claimed she'd been paid to seduce him as part of a corporate espionage scheme. Felicia read the headlines with her hands shaking around her phone. Junwoo read them and went very, very still, the particular stillness Han Bile had learned, over 6 years, to fear more than his shouting. Let me handle this, he said, voice deadly calm in a way that made even his own lawyers uneasy when he called them in at midnight. Junwoo, don't do anything reckless. Felicia started, terrified of what handling it might mean from a man who had just declared war on his own mother's expectations a week earlier. I've spent my whole life being careful for everyone else's sake, he said, pulling her into his arms, pressing a kiss to her temple, breathing her in like it steadied something in his chest. Being careful with the company's reputation, my mother's expectations, the board's confidence. I'm done being careful with the one thing that actually matters to me. That evening, in front of the entire board, in front of cameras he had personally invited against every piece of advice his legal team gave him, CEO Junwoo did something he had never done in 6 years as chairman. He spoke without a script. For 32 years, I have given this company everything, my time, my name, my silence, even my grief, he began, his voice carrying through the packed conference hall without a single tremor. In return, I ask for one thing, the right to love who I choose, without it being treated as a liability on a balance sheet. His eyes found Felicia's in the crowd, standing near the back, pale and frightened and impossibly brave for staying at all. This woman did not chase my money or my name. She walked away from both twice because she was afraid of exactly this, of being turned into a headline, a rumor, a story other people get to write about her. That is exactly why I am not letting her go, and exactly why I am telling every person in this room and every camera in front of me the truth. Felicia Adeyemi is the only good thing that has happened to me since my father died. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly, starting with Han Suk-min, who I believe is watching this broadcast right now. The room fell into stunned silence. Reporters scribbled furiously. His mother, stone-faced in the front row, finally, for the first time in his life, looked at her son with something like respect instead of correction. But the Han family did not surrender so easily. A few days later, on a Tuesday evening that started ordinarily enough, Felicia was taken, grabbed outside her apartment by 2 men working for Han Suk-min, bundled into a black van before she could scream twice, held in a warehouse on the outskirts of the city as leverage, a message meant to break Junwoo's resolve. And he did not wait for police. He went himself, security in tow, tearing through the city with a fury the tabloids would later call the night Seo Junwoo became a legend instead of a headline, running red lights, calling in favors from men he hadn't spoken to in years, mobilizing his entire security division within 20 minutes. He found her in a locked room at the back of the warehouse, frightened but unbroken, chin lifted in defiance even with her hands bound behind a metal chair. "Took you long enough," she said, voice shaking but proud, blinking back tears she refused to let fall in front of her captors. "Never again," he said, breaking the restraints himself with his bare hands, ignoring the two men who made the mistake of stepping toward him and finding themselves on the ground within seconds, courtesy of the security team he'd brought. He pulled Felicia into his chest so hard she felt his heartbeat slamming against her ear, felt him shaking in a way she'd never seen from him before. "I will burn every empire in this city to the ground before I let anyone touch you again. Do you hear me? Never again." "I hear you," she whispered into his shirt, finally letting herself cry. "I hear you, Junwoo." The Han family's operation collapsed within the week, exposed, prosecuted, disgraced in a scandal far larger than the one they'd tried to manufacture. Junwoo made sure of it personally, using every resource, every connection, every ounce of power he had built over a lifetime of being feared, finally used for something that mattered more to him than any merger ever had. Han Suk-min was arrested on kidnapping charges within days, his company's stock collapsing overnight as the truth came out in full. In the weeks that followed, Felicia struggled more than she let on. She woke some nights certain she still heard the van door sliding shut, certain she was still bound to that chair. Junwoo learned to recognize the signs, the way her breath would catch, the way her hands would find the edge of the blanket and grip it too tight, and he never once told her to get over it. He simply stayed, holding her through it, whispering that she was safe now, that he wasn't going anywhere, until the shaking stopped. "You don't have to fix me," she told him one night, embarrassed by her own tears. "I don't want to fix you," he said. "I want to stay next to you while you heal, for as long as that takes. There's a difference, and I intend to prove it to you every day if I have to." Slowly, the nightmares grew further apart. Slowly, she let herself believe that this life, this strange and sudden devotion, wasn't going to disappear the way she'd always feared good things did. By the end of the month, the scandal had faded into old news, replaced by a different story entirely, the one everyone in Seoul was now watching with breathless fascination. Junwoo, the untouchable chairman, standing in the rain outside Felicia's apartment building with a small velvet box and no umbrella, having refused every suggestion from his staff of a grand, publicized proposal at a 5-star venue. "I don't want the city watching this," he told her when she opened the door, soaked to the bone, laughing despite herself at the sight of him. "I want it to just be us. The way it should have been from the beginning before the tabloids and the board and the Han family ever got a say in it." He got down on one knee right there in the doorway, rain running down his collar, soaking through his suit, and said the truest thing he had ever said in his life. "I have been chased my entire adult life, Felicia. Chased by women who wanted my name, my money, my company, and I never once felt wanted by any of them. You are the only person who ever made me want to chase you through a city, through a scandal, through a warehouse full of men who thought they could take you from me, and I will spend the rest of my life doing exactly that every single day, even after you're mine. Marry me." She didn't make him wait, didn't need a single second to consider it, because there was nothing left in her to doubt. "Yes," she whispered, pulling him up into her arms, rain-soaked and laughing and crying all at once. "Yes, Junwoo. 1,000 times yes." The wedding was small, by his mother's standards, 300 guests instead of the 3,000 chairwoman Seo had originally demanded, but it was, by Junwoo's own admission, the only event in his life he had ever truly enjoyed rather than endured. Chairwoman Seo Miran, who had once demanded he end things before the board noticed, stood and wept openly when her son said his vows, his voice steady in a way she could not remember hearing since he was a boy. I used to think love was a weakness men like me couldn't afford, he said, holding Felicia's hands in front of everyone who had ever doubted them, in front of the board members who'd once whispered about liabilities, in front of his mother who had learned, finally, that some mergers can't be negotiated. You taught me it's the only thing worth being powerful for. Every empire I've ever built means nothing if I don't have someone to come home to at the end of it. That someone is you. It will always be you. Felicia, through tears she made no attempt to hide, answered with a promise of her own. I walked away from you twice because I was scared of exactly this, of being someone's forever. But you never stopped choosing me, even when it cost you everything you thought mattered. So, I choose you back, Seo Junwoo. Completely. For good. A year later, in the quiet of their home overlooking the city he once ruled with cold precision, Felicia placed his hand over the gentle curve of her stomach and watched the last of his defenses fall away completely, not in fear this time, but in wonder. A family, he murmured, voice thick with an emotion he no longer bothered hiding from anyone, least of all himself. I never thought I'd have one that actually wanted me, not the company, not the name. Just me. They're lucky, Felicia whispered against his lips, resting her forehead against his the way they had that first night on the rooftop, wind and all. They'll have a father who knows exactly what it means to fight for the people he loves, all the way through fire, all the